And joining us via Skype from Belfast, Northern Ireland, to discuss the latest development in Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a journalist, Francis Hughes. Good to have you join us.
Yep.
So this has now taken an international dimension. Russia has now warned any ship sailing to Ukraine that it will be seen as potentially carrying military cargoes. Does Russia have any justification for this?
I think they do. I think they believe that the drone attacks on the Crimean Bridge were potentially carried out from one of the ships going either to or from the Odessa port. I believe maybe the distance involved means that these drones had to be launched at sea by Ukrainian special forces. So in order to prevent further attacks on the infrastructure of the Crimean Bridge, I see Russia's actions as those as protecting the infrastructure in Crimea. And the attacks on Odessa, I believe Odessa is also where some of these drones are manufactured. So in retaliation for the attacks on the bridge in Crimea and the death of two civilians, two parents who died and have left their young daughter an orphan, I think what we're witnessing is the Russian response to these attacks on civilian infrastructure in Crimea.
Well, will Russia have any legal grounds to attack these ships as against just searching, the contents of the ships?
I don't know. That's something that's maybe tested basically on the battlefield of the Black Sea. I've heard reports of, if they're going to declare it as a battle zone as such, the ships involved mightn't have insurance to cover them. So therefore, they mightn't try to go to Odessa or these other ports along the coastline. It may also be possible that the captains of the ships involved will refuse to put their ship and their staff at risk. So it remains to be seen whether or not America and others will send military ships to more or less act as a convoy to bring these ships. But I mean, there are other potential places for the grain to be delivered to and from, and that is temporarily Romania. Will be used to export Ukrainian wheat and maize. And there are land corridors, so it's possible to get the food infrastructure out without having to use the Black Sea to Ukraine from the sea.
Right, so we understand that Ukraine wants to try and set up temporary shipping route through Romania. If that move is successful, could Russia begin to consider Romania as party to the war when you consider the worsening ties between both countries?
No, I don't think so. I think what we're talking about here is the export of grain from Ukraine, which is an agricultural food. Part of the reason why the Russians have backed away from the original deal is that that deal was supposed to supply the countries most in need in Africa and in Asia with wheat, but that hasn't really happened. The wheat, in fact, has gone into the European market, and there's such a glut that European countries were actually refusing to import Ukrainian grain because it was undercutting the prices of their own farmers. So I don't see any issue with the grain going through a third party. I think the issue is that the Black Sea may have been used to facilitate an attack upon the Crimea Bridge, and the Russians have decided that that is not acceptable, and they won't allow it to happen a second time.
And Putin has accused the West of distorting the grain deal, but he said, Russia could immediately return to it if all its conditions for doing so were met. What will it take?
I think what it takes and what we won't get is the honesty of the Western countries to actually stand by agreements. If we look at Minsk I and Minsk II agreements, there should be no special military operation in Ukraine by Russia if both France and Germany had stood by as the guarantors they said they would be for the Minsk agreements. they lied, and they have subsequently said that they never had any intention of implementing them. The grain deal was supposed to allow grain to go to Africa and go to Asia specifically to alleviate food poverty and food insecurity. And what we have witnessed in return for Russia to allow all this to happen is that the Ukrainians, I believe, attacked the fertilizer pipeline that the Russians had. So they want Russia to allow Ukraine to make money through exporting grain, wheat, and maize. And at the same time, they want to destroy Russia's economy by refusing to allow the fertilizers to go to Europe, and also for Russian agriculture to be able to use the SWIFT system in order to pay for imports and exports of grain and fertilizer. So you can't, the EU, NATO, and the West can't have it both ways. You can't ask Russia to facilitate the Ukrainian grain deal at the same time imposing huge sanctions on Russia's very own attempts to export their food produce.
Mm. And we've seen soaring prices of wheat around the world, but how bad do you think this could get?
Well, I think it could get very bad because to me, it's just pure profiteering. I live in Ireland and we've already seen price rises of between 20 and 25%, which they claim were due to the initial war in Ukraine. Those prices have not come down, and yet distribution costs, transport costs, fuel costs have all come down. So it's profiteering. There's enough wheat in the world to feed everybody, but you know it depends where the wheat goes to, who has the opportunity to buy it. I think it will exacerbate the food insecurity and food poverty in certain parts and regions of the world. But that the war that we are witnessing, the special military operation, all comes down to successive failures and duplicities of Western and Ukrainian leaders to facilitate peace. And while there's no peace, the war will continue. And while the war continues, it's not just the people of Ukraine and Russia who will suffer. It is many, many, many other people in countries that have absolutely no connection to the present conflict.
Mm. Watching to see how the world will react to this, especially with the prices of grain and other commodities soaring. Thank you so much for talking to us, journalist Francis Hughes.